Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. I'm your host for today. I'm Jem, and I'm here with my friends Alex and Matt. So, before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gaming the system for some exclusive content, or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com. And today we are going to be taking a leaf from the Christmas Carol story and talking about our podcasts past, present and future. So we're going to have a think about the ghosts of our podcast and think about our favorite episodes that we recorded many moons ago, our favorite episode from this year, and also looking at what we might like to be talking about in 2025. So before we kick off with that, I wanted to ask you both, are there any particular computer games that you would be interested in playing? I said it again. Computer games. No, video games. Are there any particular video games that you would like to, that you're looking forward to that are coming out in 2025?
Matt, do you want to go first?
Sure. Came up with a short list, and then the one that, when you try and think of a list of things, and then there's the one obvious massive thing that you forget. That thing was Death Stranding 2. I've still used the email address that I set up. So the original one came out in 2022. In 2018 or 19, I set up a new email address to use for YouTube, and I called it No Death Stranding, because it was the YouTube account that I was going to use to avoid having any spoilers come through. So that shows how excited I was for it 7 years ago. And so this new one, the only thing I've seen are a couple of images, and it already just looks extraordinarily distinctive and exciting. And just like with the first one, I have absolutely no idea what is going to happen in it, but I know it's going to be good. And that's what the best kinds of art are. All they require of you is to show up, and then they do the rest. And there's all this orange stuff and a massive ship coming out of the tar, and drawbridge being a new courier service, and Troy Baker's back even though you killed him on the beach, and I just have no idea what's going to happen, and I don't know exactly when it's coming out. And I actually don't know whether it's going to be. It might not be available on PC. It's probably going to come out on PlayStation exclusive, because that's what it has done recently. Then, talking of PlayStation exclusives, I do appreciate the pattern of PlayStation releasing their console exclusives to PC relatively quickly, usually within a year of them being released now. And I'm looking forward a lot to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because I really enjoyed playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, played it on PS5 and then played it on my laptop, and as with most games now, it's like playing a completely different game when you play on a laptop as opposed to a console. Even more so when you use mods, which I use on it, and I use on most games. And so I played. So the biggest thing is playing something at 4K at 60 frames a second. And when I went back to try and play, I decided to try playing Rebirth on my PlayStation, but the visual quality versus the because it was on PS5, it does 1080p at 60 frames a second, and you can just really see it's an unfortunate thing about like your technological awareness is that as soon as you've tried the next step up of something, you suddenly notice the massive difference between that and the thing you've been doing before. Like we imagine stuff that we were watching 20 years ago, and we go, oh, it felt as if we were watching it
Mm.
in 4K on a massive TV then when it was in 360p on a 14-inch fucking fridge sized TV. But I think those two are the things I'm most excited about that I definitely know are coming out.
Awesome.
So those are probably my top two.
I think two for me, and this will be no surprise to regular listeners, are Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is the next big Assassin's Creed set in Japan. And then the other one I'm looking forward to, coming out on the 14th of February, which is a clue for those of you who are fans of this particular series of games, and that's the next set of the Tomb Raider classic Tomb Raiders being remastered, so 4, 5 and 6. And number 4, The Last Revelation, is probably the one I'm most looking forward to out of the three, because it's the one I remember playing the most of, particularly the first sort of tutorial level growing up, because it's just really iconic. You know, you have 16-year-old Lara with her double plaits on the side, and Werner von Croy, who guides her through the catacombs, and there's just so many great lines in there, and I can't wait to hear them again and see them in lovely remastered graphics, and yeah, looking forward to that one in February, definitely.
Is it just remastered? Are they just neating them up, or
Hmm.
have
Just
they're
the same
redoing
as
them?
the one that came out earlier this
Mm.
year, which was 1 to 3. Um,
Mm.
that came out on the 14th of February as well, because that's Laura's birthday, the character. So they released it on then, and then so yeah, they do. So you can play it in the original graphics, but you can also press a button in to get it to do the remastered graphics as well. And you can choose to play with tank controls, which would be the original control scheme, or modern
Mm.
controls, which is where they've tried to adapt it to be modern, but you're still within that sort of grid of the classic games. So it's a little bit tricky, but you get used to it after a little while. And I've been really enjoying 1 to 3, playing through the bits of those, and getting trophies in those games as well, which is a unique experience because trophies were not a thing back in the 90s and the early 2000s. So getting trophies for doing like the assault course in Lara's home and the quad bike track and things have a special sense of achievement because it's hard. Those games are actually really hard. Now that I've had a couple of decades to appreciate, games aren't made in that way anymore. Like, they're a lot more helpful nowadays, and they hold your hand a lot more. And I think the games of that era were just like really, they had quite a high entry point. You had to just basically learn it and then make your way through it as best you could with walkthroughs online. But yeah, there was no sort of difficulty levels or anything. So it's always really fun to kind of look back and have a bit of nostalgia. I think a lot of my gaming this year has been very nostalgic, so it must be a sign of the times.
Yeah, yeah. Well, certainly if you go into the um, high street, all the clothes are definitely taking us back to the 70s. So I
Yeah.
feel like there's definitely a lot of nostalgia around at the moment. Um, what am I looking forward to? Do you know what? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just looking
Mhm.
forward to exploring new games this year. I think I might have a bit more time to do that. I think I've given myself a bit more permission to game a bit
Mm.
more. So I'm quite looking forward to, yeah, exploring some of the games that are coming out. I mean, I'm so far behind in everything that, I don't have to look at what's coming out this year. I just have to look at
Yeah,
what's come out 5 years ago and catch up. But
catch up.
yeah, but I am quite looking forward to exploring the idea of streaming, actually, like
Yes.
streaming me gaming. I'm, I think you've pitched a really good argument for it, Matt, and I think it just seems like a really interesting and fun thing to do. I've been watching some people streaming recently, but they are considerably younger and wear a lot more makeup than I even own, I think. So I think that's the thing. It feels like maybe there's a gap in the market for a mum to be streaming. I think there's quite a few like streaming mums out there, but yeah, I don't know. It just feels like maybe that's the thing that I'm sort of excited to explore with my gaming and just get into it in a bit more of a hardcore way. I think completing Baldur's Gate this year has shown me that I can still game on a sort of more intense level. And yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what games do come out and what grabs my interest. So yeah, quite excited for 2025 from a computer gaming perspective. Obviously, other platforms are available. um, Okay, so thank you very much for sharing your what you're looking forward to in 2025. And so let's talk about our podcast because I think we mentioned it a few times, but we have hit 200 over 200 episodes now. We've been doing this since 2020. So we're just moving into our fifth year,
Oh my
or will
goodness.
shortly be moving
Oh.
into our fifth year. And we have a lot of episodes to choose from. So I asked you both to have a think about what your favourite episode was from the more distant past, from the last year, and what you'd like to look at going forward. And I have to say, from my personal experience, this was a really difficult thing to do. I know that when we've submitted for various awards and things, we've looked at episodes and we've had to sort of choose episodes that give a good example of what we do. And so I thought, well, that might be a good place to start. But then I thought, no, I'm just gonna have a look at what we did and what jumps out at me. And to be fair, I enjoy I enjoy every episode that we do. I mean, I think some are more fun than others, some are more in depth than others, some are um, you know, more of a giggle, whatever, and I think it's just really difficult to choose because we've done a lot of good episodes, and yeah, that we've talked about a lot of really interesting stuff, and we've always said that we do this because we enjoy doing it, and it's just a really nice opportunity to kind of geek out with like-minded people and just talk about some of the really important issues that we experience in our gaming lives. So uh, I wanted to say that because I wanted to caveat it that any choices that we share here today are not do not have to be viewed to be disrespectful to any of the other episodes out there. It's like we had to make a choice, and that's all it is. So with that in mind, who would like to kick off with their favorite more distant episode?
I can if you like.
Go on then,
So
Alex.
I think my one, and this again, as you mentioned, Jen, was a really hard choice. I was scrolling back through our catalogue of episodes and just kept surprising myself, thinking how great each of all of them were, and then remembering like what we had been talking about and how great all of the conversations we've had are. So I had to be strict with myself and narrow it down to just the one. And I've gone for episode number 141. And I won't hold you to account, expect you to know exactly what that one is. But it's when you and I, Jem, discussed Barbie versus Lara Croft. And that was in October 2023. And I just thought I thought it was going to be a fun conversation to kick off with, but it really was a pleasant surprise, like how in depth we got through the whole episode, how many parallels we were able to draw between the characters within their respective games, because of course Barbie did have quite a few video games, and that was a really fun aspect to explore, just how many Barbie games there actually are. And then about the characters as representations of women themselves, that was a really cool subject to kind of drill down into. And it just really made me think about women in gaming, and just how women are represented in like popular media, and how sort of those characters can be viewed as role models for young women and girls, or not, depending on your viewpoint. And it was just so interesting to think about. And like I said, it just really pleasantly surprised me, like how in depth you can go with something that seemingly just is going to be like this really fun little chat, and then suddenly it throws up all these questions, really big questions. And I think that's one of the great things about our podcast, that it does so well. So that's my episode from the past. Yeah.
Absolutely. That was before the movie came out as well, wasn't it? That we had
It
that
was,
chat.
I think. Yes.
So the Barbie
Yeah.
movie was this summer, wasn't it? So wow, I remember that episode. I remember loving it, and yeah, you're right. It was one of those things that you. So many of our pods we go into thinking it's going to go in one direction, and it goes in a completely different direction. And I love that about it. I think that's one of the things why it's really so important to talk to people, actually, and to explore these issues with people, because everyone has different views on it, and it just helps you to broaden your own perspective, doesn't it? That's brilliant.
Yeah,
Thanks for
definitely.
sharing that, Alex. That
No
was
worries.
good memory.
Yeah.
Who would win in a fight
I
between
remember.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
who would win in a
Lara
fight
Croft.
between Lara Croft and
You
Barbie?
reckon? Oh, Barbie's got a lot of different resources she
Yeah.
can pull on, though. If she's embodied
Depends
so many
which
different
Barbie it
characters.
is.
Yeah, it depends which Barbie, I think.
Might be
Yeah,
World Wrestling Federation
Barbie.
wrestler Barbie.
Yeah, that might be a tough call. Or Barbie Adventure Barbie and Lara Croft might be an interesting battle. Can you imagine a fighting game with those characters in? That'd be really cool.
Barbie fighting
Like Barbie
game.
fighting
Barbie
game.
combat.
Yeah.
That'd be great
We should
idea.
definitely do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great Tekken. Brilliant.
So
Sorry,
good.
Matt. What were you going to say?
I can't remember what it was.
It's
It
alright.
wasn't as
We'll
funny
come
as
back.
as dueling Barbies and Lara Croft.
So, what about you, Matt? Then, what's your distant past episode?
So I come at it from two angles. So one of them was more uh, a specific conversation based, and that was a video game porn and Satan episodes, where that was the first time I was trying a format of I did a load of research and just read it through it with you two, and that was really fun. Just you two reacting in horror
Yeah.
as I was going through, and I love the title as well. I think we do a really good job with titling our videos, and I was particularly happy with that one. And then I really enjoy the series of videos that I've done with you, Jem, on The Last of Us, and Alex with God of War.
Those
Because I
ones
like,
definitely stand out, aren't they? Yeah.
yeah, because I like just being able to sit down and just say everything that I've thought of about something, particularly things that I really enjoy. And we have conversations that I don't see anywhere else whenever we have conversations, which there's no point in having any other kind of conversation than one, because what's the point in ones when you're just talking about things that have been talked about by everyone in the same way. So I just really enjoy, like I remember with God of War, we talked about animals for half an hour.
That's right, we did.
And Jem, you and me just talking about The Last of Us every episode and the different avenues of it, and I just really, really enjoyed those, and I'm looking forward to doing more of those. My favourite, one of my favourites, the episode itself, was when we did writing women and remaking women, which, because I'm fascinated by the words characters are made to speak, and I just remember looking through all the examples of the way women are written and just going, it's just, I like looking anything that makes me feel like I'm not crazy the way that I see the world. I go every time I come here and go, this is completely crazy, isn't it? The way the world is. And you go, yeah, obviously it is. And I go, thank God for that. Because everything everywhere is telling me that everything's fine, everything's normal, there's nothing to worry about, you're overreacting to things. And I just really enjoyed that episode of the way that we can come in and analyse something from a different angle, and giving me an opportunity to say my piece on everywhere, on stuff that I wouldn't normally have the opportunity to say it.
I'm so pleased that you mentioned the Last of Us episodes, because I really enjoyed that. That was actually going to be one of them today. So and then I found something else I wanted to to cover, but I yeah, for the exact reasons that you're given. Firstly, it encouraged me to watch it on a more steady basis than I perhaps would have done. Um, Secondly, Matt, you know, you and I have different perspectives on things like the amount of violence that we want to see in these things, or certain, you know, approaches to things, and not dramatically different, but different enough to make it an interesting conversation, and to mean that when I went into any of those conversations with you to talk about my experience of watching The Last of Us, I always came away with a new perspective on it, and so it was always a really sort of positive conversation, and it was really nice to do that as the episode was progressing, because obviously that information then fed into my experience of the continuation of the series in a way that I wouldn't have had if we'd had those conversations after the fact, after we'd watched the whole thing. So so for me, certainly it was really nice to go through it on an episode by episode basis, and yeah, it was good fun. And yeah, I also hovered over the Satan one as well, and I thought that was really good. As you say, it was a nice um introduction to a new format for us, and I'm a research nerd, so anything that encourages people to go away and do research is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, no, I think I agree with you on all of those ones. The one that I was gonna choose today, and I probably would choose a different one another day, but it was online communities, The Ugly, which was season 2, episode 9, back in the 1st of May in 2022. And we actually still had Caroline with us then,
Oh
and
gosh.
so it was 4 of us, and online
She's just left
communities.
the podcast. She's not dead.
No, she's
Yeah,
not.
no, she's not.
Made it sound like
She's
she's
not
dead.
dead.
Still very much alive.
Yeah,
Caroline is still very, very
she
much
is.
with us, but yeah, but not on the pod. Um, but yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation because
Mm.
online communities is very close to my heart, and I know that it's less so for you guys because that you don't tend to play those sorts of games, and to be fair, I don't really anymore. um but it was just really nice to have a conversation about it, and I just chose the ugly because that was the first one. But we did it, the sort of the good and the bad, and the ugly. We did episodes on each of those, and they're well worth a listen. Just you get a real sort of feel for all the different aspects of communities, and the positive and negative sides of them. And we talk about online communities today in respect of things like Roblox and um, just most games have some kind of online chat, if you play
Mm.
them, if they're multiplayer. And and then you also have places like Discord and other chat environments where people are getting together increasingly. And so I think it is something that's very relevant, even if I think the shine has worn off on that kind of sort of online community, the online space. I think people are much more transient. I think especially things like Overwatch, because you
Mm.
because you go in and you play with a random group of people almost every time. You don't really build up community. You're individual
Mhm.
players that all happen to play the same game. The community isn't there in the same way as it was in, say, World of Warcraft, or going even further back, Ultima Online. So I think it's really interesting to have a conversation about it, but it's because I think a lot of people don't think about it anymore, but it is still there, but just in a different guise. So I really enjoyed that conversation, and I really enjoyed the input from everyone, and especially you guys as people who don't necessarily
Mm.
exist in those spaces. So thank you. That was my one. So what about your more recent episode then? What do you think about? Which episode from the last year do you think? Oh, that was really good. I'm so glad we did that.
Again, this one was another difficult one to pick, but I think for me, and I could extend this to other episodes that also feature guests, but it's kind of a two-parter, and that's for anyone that wants to find them, episodes 174 and 175, where we had my good friend Georgia on, who is a gamer who has autism, and we talked about neurodiverse gaming from that perspective, or from the perspective of a neurodivergent person. And I think it was just really cool to be able to have. Well, it's always really fun to have guests on, and I think part of the reason is that we know the impact that games have on us as members of the podcast, but it's always really cool to hear from other people about the impact that gaming has on them, and whether that's positive or negative. Usually it's positive, but it's just really cool to kind of be reminded that sometimes we can get in our little podcast bubble and be like, oh, this is how we feel about things. But when we invite guests on, it's like, yeah, we kind of remind ourselves we are part of this huge community of gamers who all have thoughts and feelings about the games that we love. And we have lots of different ways of expressing that, and of communicating that. But it's just nice to be able to connect with that community when we have our guests on the pod as well. And of course I'm biased because George is a good friend of mine, and it was just so fun to have her on the pod, and I really enjoyed the discussions that she brought to the table, because she's always super knowledgeable and super enthusiastic about everything. So yeah, it was just one of my favourites from last year, definitely.
Yeah, that was such a good episode, and it was fun to record and really nice to hear her insights actually into it, and like you say, that different perspective and
Mm,
having somebody, and also an opportunity to discuss. I don't know how much you've discussed those sorts of things with her outside of
mm,
that environment, so maybe it was an opportunity to ask some questions that you might not normally might not have
mm, mhm.
discussed before.
Yeah, definitely. But I think also it was good for Georgia as well to be able to talk about gaming and with a group of other people. I mean, obviously she can talk to lots of people, but like in the podcast format, it's like a new way of thinking about the hobby that we all really enjoy, and yeah, I think it's positive for both our guests and us as well. So yeah, I just really enjoy it when we have guests on. It's really fun.
It's hard to
Absolutely.
imagine because the
Mm.
uh, whenever we have any guest on, they they haven't done over 100
Mm.
episodes with us,
Exactly. Yeah.
and most of them haven't done. If they have done a podcast of their own, they they haven't done it for as long as we've been doing our one. And the doing a podcast has definitely improved my uh, skill set in lots of different ways, like being able to speak without too much stress,
Mm.
thinking things through, expressing things in a certain way, time management, all sorts of things that this format sort of forces you to
Mm.
improve or evolve in some way. And most gamers, I think, if you put them in this format for an hour with us, they'll come up with some interesting things about themselves that they wouldn't otherwise have. It'll be a simpler path to things about themselves that
Mm.
they
Yeah.
wouldn't have ever looked at otherwise. And just because there's so many people, there's so much rushing all the time, and people don't care what other people have to think for the
Mm.
most part.
Mm.
Whereas if you just go, right, you come here for an hour, and we'll ask you what you think about things, because we're interested in what you think, and then someone can just sit back and go, "Ooh, what do I think actually?" without having to justify any of it, because
Mm.
so much of it is of
Mm.
when you have to be interesting, and you have to be entertaining, and you have to be this and that and this and that and all of this pressure. And I think we do our best not
Put
make to
pressure on
put any
people.
pressure on
Yeah.
our guests that we
Mm.
have, because that's the
Mm.
opposite of what we're about.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think you just hit the nail on the head with what you've just said, Matt.